Go.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome. I'm Eileen Hoenigman Meyer, freelance writer, Chicagoan, Barbara's Bookstore fan. I'm glad to be here with you tonight to chat with Tanya Selvaratnam. Tanya is a writer, artist, an Emmy-nominated and multi-Webby winning producer with more than 25 years of experience in the arts and social justice. Assume Nothing is Tanya's second book. We welcome her, and we're thrilled to have her here with us tonight. We're also grateful to Barbara's Bookstore for hosting this event and for hosting our chat this evening. We're thankful to the staff there, especially to Laura, for their help to us in facilitating this evening's chat. Please feel free to submit your questions throughout our conversation. We ask you to do so via the Ask a Question button, and we'll make time for those questions. Also, please note that you can buy Assume Nothing via the purchase button, and don't forget to use the discount code. Tanya and I would much rather be surrounded by books and sitting in Barbara's Bookstore. But of course, we're grateful to have this opportunity to convene with you this way. And of course, it's a little bit difficult. Things come up during this kind of a conversation. So we ask for your patience if there's any kind of a snafu or any kind of a pause or, you know, any unexpected things that do come up. So we thank you for your patience, and we're thrilled that you're here with us. So thank you. Tanya, how are things going? It's been kind of a crazy week, your first week of your book tour. How are you holding up?
I'm just happy to finally be speaking with you.
Thank you.
I love the way that you and I connected, which is that you had heard that I cite your work in my book, and you reached out with a beautiful note, and we took it from there. And I just love, you know, with all of these bookstore events, I want to do them with an author that lives in the area of the bookstore. So it was like perfect. So I just feel like this was meant to be, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight. And thank you everyone who is here.
Yes, awesome. Thank you, Tanya. So let's start kind of easy and just open up the question with, or open up the conversation with an easy, open-ended question. Why did you decide to write this book?
I wrote my way out of the darkness. And also I was inspired to write the book because I had so many people, friends and strangers, reaching out to me after the New Yorker story came out in May 2018. And they were sharing their own stories of intimate violence. And I was heartbroken to hear so many of those stories. And I also wanted to provide a way to help other people spot, stop, and prevent intimate partner violence in their own lives. So that's where the spark for the book came from.
That's awesome. One thing that really impressed me about the book, and one thing that really stood out about it, was just the clarity that you achieved with this book. Trauma is confusing. And when it's abuse or intimate partner violence, someone is actually actively trying to do that, trying to confuse. The structure of the book, the clarity of the book, they make it, you know, powerful and compelling. How did you accomplish that? How did you achieve that level of like clarity with your book? How did you put this book together?
I structured the book so that I walk the reader through the stages I went through to get entangled in an abusive relationship. Stages that I didn't understand myself until I connected with a domestic violence expert who helped me understand that what I was experiencing was not specific to me, that I didn't cause it, and that they were the classic stages: the isolation, the entrapment, the demeaning, the coercive control, and the physical violence. And by walking the reader through those stages, I helped understand myself. And I also it helped me understand the fractures that I needed to heal. And then about halfway through the book, the script flips completely. And that's when I am out of the relationship and I start to have more agency over my body, over my life, and over the narrative. So it ultimately becomes a story of liberating myself. And I hope that because I wrote myself from a very dark place to light, I hope that I help readers find their light too.
That's awesome. That's such an impressive story. And it's so inspiring, I think, for other readers and for other people who have found themselves in similar situations. Why is it important for people to share stories of abuse?
To take the shame and the stigma out of being a victim and a survivor. In the book, I go from being a victim to a survivor to a thriver. And knowing that we're not alone and we're not crazy, and that there is a unfortunately very large community of people who have experienced some form of intimate partner violence in their lives. When the statistics show that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men will experience some form of intimate partner violence in their lifetimes, and millions of those experience that violence before they turn 18. Like, I want high school students to read this book.
Right. Yeah. I think that's amazing. And I think that's a great point. As I was reading the book, that was a thought that I kept having is at what age is this going to be a book that I'm going to share with my children? Because I think it is so important, you know, for to build awareness and for kids to know this and to realize this. So Tanya, you're an empath. This is one of many things that I think we share and that we have in common. And this is a powerful quality, but it positions you to absorb other people's emotions. And throughout the book, a common theme is that other survivors confide in you. They share stories of their own traumas with you. How has that been for you? Does it help you to cope, or does it make you sort of feel awash with trauma? Your own trauma is so fresh. How do you sort of emotionally manage that as other people sort of share, as your trauma sort of brings their own trauma stories to the surface?
That is an incredible question, and I'm really glad you asked it, because it's one that I've been grappling with this week and trying to figure out for myself, because there have been many, many people reaching out this week, sharing their stories, wanting advice, wanting to know how to come forward. And it just makes me sad that there is so much abuse out there. But I also feel very grateful that I am a storyteller and that I am a documentary filmmaker and that I have a background as an academic, so that I can provide this resource for them. And I hope that they read the book. You know, these are people who've been reading the articles about the book or who've attended bookstore events. And I just hope they read the book, because it's full of resources. And also it's a narrative that draws the reader in. So how do I feel? It really depends on whether it's somebody I know, or in some cases, as the book reveals, there are many surprises in the book, but I will, this is a little bit of a spoiler, but there were women who reached out to me after the New Yorker story came out, who were also victims of Eric Schneiderman, both many years before I was his girlfriend and after the New Yorker story came out. And that, when those notes came to me, that's when I did feel the trauma again. When it wasn't somebody in my story, I felt sympathy and empathy. When it was someone who had been a previous girlfriend of Eric Schneiderman, who was the former New York State Attorney General, I felt like we shouldn't have had to have those memories. And his pattern of abuse had been going on for decades, even though he made me feel like I had done something to cause it.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to read a short excerpt from the book. Looking back, I see how I got sucked in. Eric's outward-facing spirituality was a mask for the torment beneath the surface. His outward-facing feminism was a mask for his misogyny. He perpetuated a narrative of himself as an agent of change and transformation. Many people I trusted depicted him as a hero, and he positioned himself as standing up for many causes I believed in. I bought it. Who are abusers? Where does abusive behavior come from? Why is it normalized? What needs to change?
The cults of personality that form around powerful people, talented people, rich people who are abusive are very damaging to the people who are in those cults and also damaging to society. And Eric Schneiderman is an example of somebody who is leading a cult of personality. Many abusers, if not all, are bifurcated individuals. There is their public-facing self and their private-facing behavior. So Eric presented himself publicly as a feminist, as a progressive hero. He was a key ally of the Me Too movement, which made this cognitive dissonance even more jarring. But privately, he abused me. He was also flat out racist with the language that he used with me, the master slave terminology. I was really when I looked through my notes, and I had hundreds of pages of notes when I sat down to write the book, and I looked at those specific parts because I'm an intrepid note taker. I always have been. Eileen, another thing you and I share is that we're both introverts by nature. And writing for me has always been a way of getting things out. The notes that I had about the way he would criticize my hair, referring to me as a brown girl that he found far away to make his slave. I was the only one of his girlfriends that I am to this day aware of who was not white, who was dark-skinned. And that to me was another example of his cognitive dissonance, not just the one between his public-facing feminism and his private-facing abuser bifurcation, but also his private-facing ally of communities of color and his private-facing racism. So as far as where do abusers come from, perpetrators are of all stripes, just as victims look like all of us. And entwined with that is the conditioning that normalizes the cycle of violence from the time that we are born. And it is very much entwined with the patriarchy, which prioritizes operating from a place of scarcity and competition, this need to power over people. And what I hope is that with a lot of struggle, we are going to get to a place where true power is celebrated, where we are going to be able to rise together and operate from a place of abundance. And I think the pandemic has highlighted how much we need to make that transition.
I think that's a great point. And it goes into, and I'm paraphrasing, but like a part of the book where you talk about kind of where like micro abuse is ubiquitous, like moments of little abuse where sort of people have to one up each other. Abusive, language, abusive habits. And I love the idea that if we could get something meaningful from the pandemic, it could maybe be this new climate, this new way of being where it could be more driven by kind of a different set of assumptions or a different set of beliefs or a different set of ways of behaving towards each other.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
this reminds me exactly of the work that I cite by you, because a friend of mine who had sent me your article about what to do when you work with somebody who is threatened by you.
Yeah.
And the micro and macro aggressions that occur in the workplace, and how when somebody's threatened by you, there's almost nothing you can do. They will constantly be throwing shade your way.
Yeah.
And it resonated so much for me. And that workplace situation for me occurred after I had gotten out of the abusive relationship with Eric. So I was kind of in disbelief that I was having to deal with this co-worker who was just trying to undermine me. And so this a friend of mine sent me that article, and I was like, oh my gosh, this it actually inspired that chapter that I have about how abuse is all around us, and we need to understand. I think about Vice President Harris's incredible opinion piece in the Washington Post a few weeks ago about exodus of women from the workforce, and how it's a national emergency that needs national attention and solutions. The domestic violence crisis is very much part of that, because when you disempower women financially, you make them more susceptible to being abused.
That's such a great point. Yeah. And I mean, I think that you talk so passionately, and I think it's such an important point, about the various dimensions of abuse, financial being one of them, but all the different ways in which a person can, all the different levels on which a person can experience abuse. And I think that's another thing that's so powerful about this book, is I think you had this experience of abuse, and you kind of did the research on behalf of everyone else. And you created a guidebook for other people that are experiencing this, so that they would have almost like I kind of thought of it almost as like a flashlight in an emergency kit, so that people would have this to refer to, so that if they found themselves in this situation, they would have this emergency tool that they could pull out, and it has all these resources in it that they could employ to get themselves out, to understand their situation, and then also to get themselves free, which is a pretty incredible, not just piece of writing, but also life-saving tool, which is, I think, a pretty incredible feat.
I hope so. I get I feel excited and also overwhelmed when people tell me that the book has the potential to save lives. And I feel, I just wonder why there hasn't been that tool before. And I think part of the reason is that there has been so much stigma around intimate violence in committed relationships. And many of the writing that is out there, it's too academic, or it's too clinical. And it was very important for me to, as a storyteller, to write a narrative that would draw the reader in. You know, I didn't set out to write a thriller, but it has been described as such. I wrote the story as it happened. It just it turned out that it was a roller coaster. And I'm glad that I was able to use what I know how to do, which is tell stories and make documentary films, to write a book that not only has a narrative, but that also has a toolkit. And I'm very grateful to Jennifer Friedman, the domestic violence expert who helped me understand my own situation, to collaborate with on that toolkit. So it's kind of like what the experts wish you knew. And what I'm very proud of is how there are dozens of organizations listed of how people can get help, because then it provides not just victims and survivors, but also their loved ones with resources that they can reach out to if they suspect that their friend is in an abusive relationship.
I think that's wonderful. And I some of the things that surprised me in the book, that, I mean, I think I knew this, but it was interesting to read it again. I think one maybe misconception that I think people have is that abuse is in the eye of the beholder, and it's not. There is, I think the more these things are defined, and the more people have a resource that shows what this definition is, I think that's a very powerful resource to have. And one thing that I read in your book that I believe I knew, but it was powerful to read it again, is facts from around the world. Like the fact that in Russia, domestic abuse was decriminalized. And I really have thought a lot about this. Like, that's just a ponderous thing, that could actually be decriminalized.
Well, it shows how much we devalue people's safety.
Right,
and
exactly.
It shows how we have the wrong people making decisions on our behalf.
Right.
And there was a study that was released just this week by the National Commission on COVID-19, which is a bipartisan commission, and it looked at the domestic violence crisis in various regions around the world and found that, in fact, during COVID, there has been an alarming increase in domestic violence incidences, but also that is the floor, not the ceiling of the increase, because most domestic violence goes underreported. So
Wow.
I feel that the horror stories of what happened behind closed doors when victims and abusers were together in lockdown are going to emerge after we get to the other side of the pandemic, whenever that pandemic might be. And Katie Benner of the New York Times wrote a really fantastic piece about this study. And I hope it gets more attention, because it is a national emergency.
Yeah. So something I think we hear a lot about, but I feel like when I actually look up this word and try to really get my mind around it, I feel like the definitions don't actually get to the heart of what this means. What exactly is gaslighting? I feel like when I read about it from the outside, it's kind of hard to understand, like, how is this a mechanism for abuse? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What is an example of this? How does it work?
I believe in giving micro details
Mm-hmm.
so that it's as illustrative as possible. So in the book, one painful example for me is that when Eric Schneiderman and I were first starting to see each other, he would look at the scars that run down my torso, which I have from surgery for cancer, and he would look at them as if they were a badge of courage, that I had overcome adversity. As time went on, he would look at my scars as if they were ugly, and he would tell me to get plastic surgery to remove them. He even had a plastic surgeon who would do it for me. He also wanted me to get a boob job. And gaslighting takes many, many forms. But if somebody's making you feel bad about yourself, making you feel like you are always doing something wrong, there's no particular way you can be that would assuage them, then, that is gaslighting. But gaslighting takes many forms. And the thing about abusers is that they are very skilled at tapping into their victim's particular weakness and manipulating it.
And I know you talked about in past conversations kind of the customization of abuse as being particular to your circumstance and in your relationship with Eric. And I wonder, is that part of this picture? Is that part of gaslighting?
Well, definitely, because what I would discover through the incredible reporting of Jane Mayer and Ronan Farrow in The New Yorker, and also from the conversations I had with one previous girlfriend before The New Yorker story came out, and then with one who connected with me a year and a half after the New Yorker story came out, is that he really had customized the abuse for each of us. So in one case, he would tell her to get Botox and criticize her thick ankles. And there are some of other stories that previous girlfriends have shared with me that I can't say because they have not been public. But that is just a concrete example of the way the gaslighting is customized.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. So you talk in the book about manipulative abuse that aims to mimic sexual sophistication, but it's clearly different because it's enacted without conversation, preparation, or consent. In October 2018, you described your experience in the New York Times. I was scared, but when I said stop, when I jumped out of bed, he made me feel as if I wasn't meeting his needs, that I was boring and not sexually liberated. This wasn't just cruel or weird sex. It was one element in a larger dynamic of power and control. In an interview earlier this week, you said abusers are watching porn that glorifies abusing women. A recent article in The Atlantic which is called The Startling Rise of Choking During Sex, cites a study finding that around a quarter of women have felt scared during sex, many because their partners started choking them. According to research from that article, 13% of girls aged 14 to 17 have already been choked. I wonder if we can talk a bit about what you've called, I think, the next wave of the Me Too movement. And I think that kind of factors into this.
Yeah, so I have been grateful for and very saddened by the stories of FKA Twigs and Evan Rachel Wood, who, what was remarkable for me is that they were at very different life stages when they experienced abuse than I was. We are separated by generations, but united by trauma. And the fact that so many young women, as you cite, are experiencing this physical violence of choking during sex, it's just, to me, a really clear indicator that these behaviors, they're not coming out of nowhere. They are being acquired. They're being learned. And part of where they're being learned is they're all watching the same bad porn that is made by total misogynists. And what I really think needs to happen, and I actually have been talking with a friend about starting a company to do this, is we need more female and feminist directors making porn that celebrates mutual pleasure. You know, my book is very much about mutual pleasure and getting to that place where harm is not inflicted and where consent is obtained. Like, I am very open to the fact that what's kinky for one is really not for another. And it's not about discouraging sexual experimentation, but it's about the importance of consent, which is a key component of BDSM. And in Eric Schneiderman's case, he tried to make a statement, as many of these perpetrators do, that he was engaging in role-playing in consensual relationships. This is something that Marilyn Manson tried to do as well. But, you know, in my situation and also the situations of the other previous girlfriends of Eric's, he slapped us out of nowhere. There was no consent asked for and obtained. So yeah, I think we need to, there's a whole ecosystem overhaul that needs to happen. And one of it needs to be porn, because also the social media platforms need to be more accountable, because they have allowed for the proliferation of violent and vitriolic content without any sense of responsibility. And also, I think they're all kind of playing dumb. Like, we just provide the platform. People are mature enough to make up their own minds. It is like cognitive science 101 that repetitive messaging and imaging has an impact on the brain.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a great point. And I think it's something that it's time to have this conversation. And like hearing you start to address this is like, it's exciting because I feel like the seeds of this conversation have been in the ether for a long time. And once you started to pull it out and begin this conversation, I think it has huge implications, and it's actually really exciting to see this conversation starting to mount and starting to happen because we need to begin having this conversation for sure.
Yeah.
So, yes, thank you for leading this. It's definitely
there are many people leading it, but I'm really grateful that my book is coming out at exactly this moment when the conversation is erupting in the public discourse and in the media. So I hope that we can take this moment and carry it to a better place of just opening up. And I really do hope that people feel liberated to share their own stories of intimate violence, because the more of us that share our stories, the closer we can get to addressing the problem.
Absolutely. So politics. What were the political implications of coming forward, Tanya? Like, I think a dimension of your story that is just so heavy and so interesting is kind of the weight of the situation that you were in. Eric was seen as a liberal hero. He was a top law enforcement officer in New York State. What was that like for you, coming forward with this story?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't write a political book. I wrote a book about intimate violence, but because my abuser was a prominent politician and one of the most powerful in New York State, the politics in the book were inevitable. I felt enormous risk to my career and reputation, and also to my personal safety. I had no idea how coming forward would land, how people would come after me. I envisioned that if it did not land well and he were still in power, that I would leave the country, go away for a while.
Yeah.
But I knew that I was doing the right thing because I knew that I was part of a pattern. And I believe that no powerful or talented person who is an abuser should be protected, because there is going to be somebody better who is not an abuser to replace them. And in fact, that was the outcome. We now have James as our Attorney General. It was not my intended outcome, but it was an outcome that that made me happy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I did feel enormous risks in the buildup to coming forward because I didn't have many avenues, legal avenues that I could turn to that didn't lead to him. I had explored many of them. I had explored a civil claim, an ethics complaint, going to law enforcement, but I knew that he would be immediately tipped off, and I was warned that I would be in more danger if I tried to do that. So it was very different than other cases of perpetrators, because my abuser was so much at the head of the legal system in the state.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think the kind of happy ending, I mean, not that that's obviously like an oversimplification, but as I was going through the really scary part of your story and just like rooting for you, you know, and worrying for you as I was reading it, I just thought how in that moment of reading that story, you were such an every woman who has been in that situation, you know, of feeling like, oh my God, I have the weight of this family on my shoulders, or I have the weight of this situation on my shoulders, you know, and I'm so afraid that, you know, how am I going to get out of this situation? And to see you get out of it, and then to see us, to see New York have this new figure who is doing such an awesome job and is such a, it really was like, oh, yay. So, it was kind of wonderful to see, how all of that resolved in a very sort of classic happy ending kind of sense. So,
well, and I really owe huge gratitude to David Remnick, Jane Mayer, Ronan Farrow for their incredible care for the story. I also feel immeasurable gratitude to my friends and colleagues who really helped me pick myself up off the floor and keep moving. And I was really grateful that I had work. So many women and men get stuck in abusive relationships because they don't have the financial resources to get out. But I was really grateful that I had work. So I had to keep showing up because I had to make a living. And I was very grateful that the day after the New Yorker story hit, some of the projects that I was working on or about to work on said, we're still on. And that's
awesome. Yeah.
And that just to because it might not have turned out that way.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. I'd love to talk a little bit about Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer have kind of created a real niche for themselves in the Me Too era of being able to help victims talk about their trauma, deal with their trauma in a very concrete kind of way by telling these stories. And I just wonder, what was the experience of working with them like? Why did you choose them? And just maybe what can people who deal with survivors, whether in whatever sense, maybe if it's a work sense or a personal sense, if there's maybe something that they could learn from their approach, how was it that they sort of dealt with your story that helped you to tell it to them?
They were great listeners. And I think I think that is an example for friends and family of people that they suspect are in abusive relationships, to ask questions that might elicit answers about what the victim is dealing with. You never know when they might be ready to talk, and to be open, to be empathetic, to be non-judgmental, non-confrontational. It's not a very easy thing to talk about. It took me a very long time to talk with my closest friends about it, because I knew that once I talked, even though I was able to talk about his depression, his drinking, his controlling behavior, I was not able to speak with my friends about his physical violence in the sexual context. One, because I knew it was wrong. Two, because once I put it out there, I wouldn't be able to take it back. And three, because I was really hopeful that he was going to get help, as he said he was going to, and that he would change. Also, abusers are very, very skilled at making you feel sorry for them, that they need you, and that if you leave them, that you are harming them. So there were many reasons why I was not sharing all the violent details. But by the time that I connected with Jane Mayer and Ronan Farrow, and it was initially David Remnick that I spoke with, and he put Jane Mayer first on the story. And when I first met with, Jane Mayer is a legend, and I had read her investigative reporting, and she is intrepid. And I was really amazed, and the scene is described in the book. I was really amazed when I first got together with her, how she has this kind of sparkly eyes that she'd laugh if she heard me talking about this, but these sparkly eyes that just make you feel like you want to hang out with her.
Yeah.
You want to have a conversation with her. But it was very important for me to keep reminding myself that as much as I enjoyed speaking with her, about other things not related to the horrible story, that she was not my friend. It was very important for me to keep reminding myself, the journalist is not your friend. And also that even though I knew I was in very good hands, I also knew that the story was out of my hands, and I had to relinquish any sense of expectation about how my story would be told. I had to trust in the journalistic process, and I had to submit myself to the scrutiny of the journalistic process. But I felt well prepared for that because of what I had dealt with in my personal life with regard to my health, which is that, years before that, in 2012, when I had the 2 cancer tumors discovered completely incidentally before they were symptomatic, when I was pursuing fertility treatments, I had to submit to the medical process, and I had to trust in my doctors, and just inform myself as much as possible, and be my own advocate and ask a lot of questions, which I did in the journalistic process as well. But that I had to relinquish control.
Right. That's an interesting connection between the relinquishing control and those two, in those two different circumstances. So trauma and healing, what is the aftermath of being a victim? And what advice would you have for other victims on healing, on moving forward?
The trauma sets in at a cellular level, whether the abuse lasts for a few minutes or many years, and that there are resources to help with the recovery, and that no one should have to go it alone, and rely on those resources. There are many free resources, and in the book I include the various organizations that can be reached out to. Mental health counseling is such an important part of healing and recovery. It was important for me. Everyone is different. There's no one size fits all. What works for one person might not work for another. But in my case, I had the domestic violence expert I spoke with often, and I still speak with. I have a trauma therapist, and also because I wasn't just dealing with the trauma of my experience with Eric, but also this trajectory of various traumas because of my miscarriages and infertility and cancer and divorce. So it was just like a long time coming for me to unpack and unravel as much of that. And my recovery is ongoing. I feel like I am my strongest self ever because I have written my way out of the darkness, and feel very centered and grounded in where I am now, and grateful for the coven of friends and the sisterhood around me. But the recovery is ongoing. There have been incredible studies about how the trauma of physical violence and sexual assault, even if it's just for a short amount of time, the impact of it at the cellular level lasts a lifetime.
Yeah.
Like, remember it more strongly than what would be on the surface more meaningful and long-lasting moments. So what I would say to everyone is, like, seek out counseling and talk with your friends, talk with professionals who know what to do. And in my case, I also find ways to experience joy. It's so important. Like,
yes.
We're in the middle of a pandemic. Seek out people who bring you joy. And I also meditate a lot. And especially this, I usually meditate once or maybe twice a day. But this week, because of having to tell the story over and over again, I've been meditating like 3 or 4 times a day.
I'm sure.
And meditation, people don't understand so much. It's meditation takes many forms. I do what I call kind of like, I do it very seriously, but also I basically meditate like first thing in the morning before I've even gotten out of bed. And it's just an opportunity to tune out all the noise and let your and focus on your breathing. And that has a physiological effect. So I think it's just very important to think, meditation, people think, spirituality, Buddhism, they can't quite wrap their heads around it. But for me, meditation is about focusing on my breath and my body and feeling whole.
And like healing.
Yeah.
Kind of healing yourself. What comes first, meditation or Stevie Wonder in the morning? That's a very serious question.
So yes, that is Stevie Wonder in the background. Stevie Wonder is one of my favorites. I listen to Stevie Wonder pretty much every morning. And but because I have to get up out of bed to put the Stevie Wonder on, the meditation comes first.
Okay, well, that's good. That makes sense. Should we field some questions if we have some? Let's see if we can figure this out. I think we have a question button. Ah, there it is. Oh, yes. All right, good question. What surprised you most when you were writing the book?
Well, I'll give a heavy answer, and then I'll give a light answer. A heavy answer is that while I sat down to write the very last chapter at the beginning of the summer of last year, I received an email. Like, I already had the whole last chapter mapped out, but then I received an email from a woman who had been abused by Eric Schneiderman long after the New Yorker story came out. And I remember reading that email and shaking. And that was what surprised me the most. And I came to a place, the book is called Assume Nothing. I really feel like nothing surprises me, but that one threw me off, and it helped me reshape the last chapter, which I'm really, really proud of. The other thing that surprised me is that while I was working on that last chapter, I was in Portland, Oregon, where I do, I think, my best writing. The trees and the nature of Portland are very inspiring. They're prehistoric. And I was very solitary. It was during the pandemic. I did not want to get COVID because I was not sure that if I got it, I would survive it because of my health history. I'm very proud to say that I got vaccinated last week. I never thought I would be happy to have 2 types of cancer. First time I was happy to have 2 types of cancer. But while I was writing that chapter, a robin appeared. And I don't want to say too much of it because there's a whole lot of interaction between me and this robin, but a bird appeared. And I have had that place in Portland for 6.5 years now. A bird had never hung out on my deck, and it built a nest. And so kept me company for weeks. Cool. So those were the things that really surprised me. The hearing that Eric Schneiderman had not ended his pattern of abuse, and having a visitation by a bird.
Awesome. That was a question from Christine. And let's see. We have a question from Rachna.
Rachna from Houston, who wrote me one of the most beautiful notes after my essay for the New York Times came out. And in fact, her organization, DIA, serves South Asian victims and survivors in Houston and is listed as a resource in the book. So I just wanted to give that background.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rachna. It's so frustrating that your abuser hid behind the mask of feminism. Was that mask a way he would gaslight you into thinking that he wasn't harming you? Did you receive pushback coming forward because of this perception of him?
Well, the bifurcation of abusers, especially those who are on the outside good guys, can be very jarring when you are their victim. And it makes it hard to reconcile the person they are in public with the way they treat you privately. So yes, for me, that was part of the gaslighting for sure. It also made it very difficult to come forward against him because he wasn't like a misogynist rock star, like, or you know, a notoriously predatory film producer. He was a progressive hero. So it made coming forward very hard.
Yeah.
And many people tried to discourage me from coming forward because they felt that he was doing good work. And this is where like the myth of indispensability comes from. I believe every human life is sacred, but abusers' jobs are not.
Right. That's a great point. Can you talk about, this is from Alice, can you talk about the healing process? I am the wife of a woman who had traumatic childhood abuse. Many of the tactics are the same. Her healing process is hard to explain to people. Can you share your experience on the healing process?
Well, we covered some of this already, which is that every victim is unique. And in the same way that getting out of an abusive relationship, it's very important to have a safety plan that one develops with a good organization that is specific to the constituency of the victim. I also believe that recovery is a unique process for everyone. And there are so many different ways. And I can speak for myself, which is that, as I mentioned, I meditated more. I really focused on people who gave me love and comfort and whom I felt joy around. And, you know, it's important to get kind of the vampires out of your life. Like clearly my energy linked with a vampire when it linked with Eric Schneiderman. So it's just, you know, part of my strength now comes from knowing that I will never tolerate abuse ever again in any context. I just won't. Like,
I love that.
I've written the book. I have written this resource. I've written out what I experienced, and I hope that it helps others not tolerate abuse in their own lives. And that if they have experienced trauma and abuse and haven't yet recovered, that I hope that the resources in the book help them figure out how to recover, how to reach out to organizations that can help them, and also the different tools that can be done on your own time to help you recover. I mean, there's so many scientific studies about the physiological impacts of breathing and walking and diet, and there's so much, and it takes a lot of hard work. I mean, I still do a lot of hard work to heal myself, which, you know, even though I do feel very strong and I seem very strong, and like, you know, I'm a nerd. I get very engaged by conversations like this in a good way. I have my moments. You know, today, as an example, a friend who has also experienced abuse, she sent me a text that she was reading my book and that she felt psychically connected to me. And she had sent me a package of her daughter's drawings that her daughter had done for me after looking at pictures of me. And her daughter looked at the book and said that she looks at the book and feels like, so there's a photo of me on the back of the book, which, I have here and you can see it, but it's like, I want to put myself on the back of the book, but my brilliant, wonderful editor, Lisa Sharkey, really wanted to. And my friend's daughter said that her daughter felt like I was looking right at her, and that it helped, that it was helping her make these drawings. And, you know, I just started crying. So,
yeah. So strong, but fragile at times.
Not fragile. I don't feel fragile. I feel like I feel very open. And that's
a good
good
thing.
because so much of trauma is what it closes you up. You feel clenched. You feel like you're hurt, like your heart is burning down. Part of the healing is just like being able to open up that heart and those pathways again. But with more awareness and more.
That's awesome. That's a great description.
Yeah.
I think we can do another question or two. Let's see. What happened to Eric Schneiderman, and are there any charges against him? I don't know if you want to talk so much about, if you want to field a question about that, or if that's kind of off your radar screen.
So immediately after the New Yorker story came out, a special prosecutor was assigned to investigate. There were multiple investigations, and within about 6 months, and this is recounted in the book as well. And I participated in those investigations. So I submitted first to the journalistic investigation, and then I submitted to the legal investigation. It was very important for me to participate in those processes because I strongly believe in due process. I believe in establishing the veracity of the allegations and also the credibility of the accuser. In that case, the accuser was me. So a thorough investigation took place. I was very heartened by the investigators that I met with. They were sensitive. They asked tough questions. And the investigation was concluded saying that because of statutes of limitations with regard to some of the previous girlfriends, and also because of the bar at which these behaviors become a crime, that the criminal charges were not going to be pressed, but that the special prosecutor believes the women and proposed that there be legislation to make physical violence in the sexual context without consent a crime. And I felt that was actually a positive outcome.
Good.
And you know, the laws need to change on consent, because it's like the research of Rachel Louise Snyder, the incredible writer and journalist, No Visible Bruises. Like, do I have to have bruises to be believed? And another thing that happened at the conclusion of that investigation is that Eric himself made a statement that he apologized to the women he had harmed and that he was on a lifelong path to recovery and he was getting help and he had gone to rehab. Now, of course, I was pleased at the time when that announcement happened, which was in fall of 2018. But as I revealed during this conversation, and as the book reveals, I found out that he actually hasn't ended this pattern of abuse. And so finally I felt rage at him.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. All right, I think we've addressed all our questions with just a couple of minutes to spare.
1 minute to spare.
Yes. So that's pretty good time. Well, thank you so much. I think this was an awesome chat and a wonderful conversation. And I thank everyone for joining us for this event tonight. And please don't forget to buy your copy of Assume Nothing. And thank you and good night. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you so much, Eileen. It was so great to finally be in conversation with you after being like email buddies over the past year plus. This was cool. And one day we'll get to meet in person. You know,
I look forward to that.
I haven't been to Chicago in a while and I love it there. You know, I've done a bunch of shows at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that museum. The MCA is like our favorite place. We were just talking about how the museums now are, they're open, but not a lot of people are going. So it's kind of like a golden opportunity.
Right. Well, when everybody's vaccinated, I'm going to be partying like it's 1999.
That's how we feel too. I know.
I'm going to be out and about. So everybody, spread the message, get vaccinated. There are still a lot of
Right.
people, too many people who do not know the facts on getting vaccinated. And I feel like everyone should get the word out. Ask your friends and family. In the same way we were going around asking our friends and family, have you registered to vote? Have you voted?
Yes.
Like, have you looked up whether you're eligible for the vaccine, and have you gotten vaccinated?
Yes. My parents just got
and
vaccinated.
yeah, and if everyone buy copies of the book, pass it along, give it to your friends, and I'm at Tanya Author on all social platforms. And Eileen, what's your EH Meyer?
Yes. Yeah.
So follow us both.
Yes.
And thank you.
Thank you. You have another engagement tonight, right?
Yeah, I do. On West Coast time.
Wow. You are going to sleep well this weekend.
I'm not so sure about that. I'm doing Good Morning America on the weekend, but
Are you?
but that's okay.
Oh, that is okay. You're doing awesome. You're doing such great stuff.
You know, I can't say I enjoy doing press. I enjoy doing the conversations. I can't say I enjoy doing press, but I want to do it because I want people to know about the book and its message.
Yeah. And
so
you're
I will
doing
do anything that is needed to be done to get the message out there.
Yeah. I think that's a good policy.
Yeah.
And I love the articles you've been doing also. Like, I've been reading everything you've been writing, and Tanya, it's like, I think your writing is so great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, I'm glad to do it. I'm really glad that I was able to have these the articles came really quickly to me.
How are you doing those? Are you doing those like now? You're writing that stuff now?
Yeah. I'm going to be working on another one this weekend.
Wow.
Because it gives outlets a way to have original content for me, not just like an interview or
Right.
or a feature. So I was really happy to do one for Glamour. You know, Glamour is such a big part of the book because I was working for Glamour when the story was unfolding. And I was really pleased about the piece for NBC News. That was a great one.
That was a great article. Yeah.
I was really glad about that one.
Yeah. Well, I love your writing.
Oh, thank you. I love yours too.
Thank
It's
you.
in the book.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think we can sign off now.
Yes.